Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the High Performance Health Podcast. I've got Pav, David, and Scotty with me, the OGs today. Andrew is unavailable as well. So we're going to be talking about unilateral training for strength and stability. And we're going to also be diving into some fad diets. Fad diets, I think, is a really interesting topic for me. I'm sure you guys will agree. It's we've heard everything under the sun. So it'll be interesting to get your sort of thoughts and ideas and opinions on sort of some of the most interesting fad diets that you've seen, some of the crazy ones. But let's start off with unilateral training for strength and stability. I think something that we should all be focusing on in our training, especially when we're not only ourselves but also our clients. So, Scotty, first of all, let's start off with a really easy one for everybody that's listening, because some people might not know what this means. Can you explain unilateral training and what is it?
So unilateral training would be the balance or the sum of right and left rather than right and left together. So essentially, if you look at a squat, when we look at bilateral deficit, if you look at a squat with both feet on the ground, the opposite of that would be training one leg at a time, whether it's the same motion or a different motion. So it's the sum of right and left rather than right and left together.
Yeah. And if you're thinking about designing a training program, for me, when I train, I'm very much a unilateral lower body. I prefer to do unilateral stuff for my lower body more than I would do potentially focusing on upper body stuff. Um, what kind of exercises would you specifically say, uh, what kind of exercises would you say are better for unilateral training, in comparison to, a deadlift or a split squat, for example?
So if you're purely talking about lower body and you're
Yeah.
a beginner, standing one-legged calf raises, rear foot elevated split squats or Bulgarian squats, if you like, slider squats. Reverse lunges will be better than front lunges because it's closed chain rather than open chain. Single leg press on a 45 degree if access to it. Those type of exercises will be good for beginners without having to load the exercise up too much. You can get just as much benefit from body weight with using one leg at a time than you can from loading up a back squat, for example. And it'll also expose and help develop structural imbalance, the functional capacity of your ankle, your control mechanisms. It'll help increase fall prevention. A lot to it.
I've got a stat here actually from the Journal of Strength and Conditioning. 65% of athletes have some kind of degree of muscular imbalance, which obviously, if there are asymmetries, then you're looking at potential future injuries, and these things obviously need to be addressed. Just one quick question as well. You mentioned there, just for people listening, closed chain and open chain. Just give me a couple of examples of closed chain and open chain exercises.
So let's look at the lunge, right? For example, so people would say they would program and they'd say do a lunge. So if I've got a pair of dumbbells, I'm standing straight up and I want to lunge forwards. If I'm lunging with my right foot has to leave the ground and then become contacted with the ground again. As soon as my foot hits the floor, that force goes through the ankle, through the knee, and through the hip. If I'm doing a reverse lunge, same dumbbells in my hand, my and I want to load up my right leg again, my left foot leaves and goes backwards without leaving the floor. The right foot stays in contact with the ground at any one time. So then there's no direct force through the foot, through the ankle, through the knee, and through the hip. So that chain is closed off. The other thing would be in squatting. The squatting is a closed chain exercise because both feet are on the ground at the same time. So that would be another example of closed chain.
Yeah, awesome. So, what are some of the best? Sorry, how can athletes? I'm going to ask this to David. How can athletes in general, kind of fitness people, incorporate unilateral training into their routines? How would you throw it? Would you go bilateral and unilateral? Would you have just purely unilateral days, or would you throw? Would you just sprinkle in some unilateral stuff?
It depends on the type of athlete, the type of person. Usually, a good movement screen prep beforehand would be a good idea because then you're going to correct or see the imbalances, and then you'll be able to highlight this is a weakness, so we need to try and balance that out. It's good to do both, I feel, in general in strength training because I think that you can really work the different, as Scott said, the different closed chain, open chain exercises and build strength up in different ways. But I think that understanding of your body's biomechanics is really important when you start to bring in unilateral exercises because you don't want to strengthen one side that's already strengthened. But you definitely want to highlight where the weaknesses are and build on that. Plus, you can kind of get lots of variations that are quite fun and make training a bit more interesting by sprinkling in a bit more different stuff as well.
Yeah. How long do you think as well, if somebody has a muscular imbalance, how long do you think it takes to bring that balance a little bit more into an even keel?
It
I guess
can
it
take
depends
very
on,
short time. Yeah,
yeah,
it can take very short time because it's the neuromuscular side. So sometimes the brain just getting used to firing muscles, but others it can take, years to actually correct an imbalance. This depends on the person, the genetics, and the type of imbalance it is. Some people have major imbalances, particularly in the hips, where you'll see someone kind of one leg longer than the other, and they've got hip dominant, they're kind of pelvic twist, and then they're using one side more than the other, and that glute will be pretty much dormant for so long. And they'll be used to doing probably squats in a gym bilateral and just doing the same dominant leg over the other one. So that's why it's good to kind of do that other side and do the unilateral stuff to correct it.
it's amazing as well, isn't it? Actually, when you look at somebody's squat that you've been working with for a while in the gym and their squat looks relatively okay until you put them into a unilateral position, and all of a sudden that one leg, the strength difference is absolute night and day. I don't know about you guys. When I used to work in a gym, one tool that I would utilize quite a lot was the FMS screen as well. I found that
Yeah.
a huge tool in order to sort of look at any kind of muscular imbalances and then sort of being able to treat that in with the specifically designed training program. Pav, what sort of unilateral exercises do you think give the best bang for their buck? What kind of exercises do you yourself use to in your own training program?
Um, I like David, like he was talking and you gave him a question about how quick. I have one example, and that's what I use as well. I've started to train with my son started to train with me. It's been third month now, quite consistent. Anyway, between 2 to 3 times a week, we're there doing full body training. And obviously, I started with him doing things that incorporate explosive power, jumps and body weight mainly for movement. And then I gave him to do like side jumps and also the split squats. First thing I was thrown, this is stupid exercise. I don't want to do that. By the time he did his third set, he was absolutely mastering it, comparing as a first set, yeah? He was struggling to keep the balance. So sometimes it can be really, really quick, yeah? Or walking lunges, same. Yeah, he was dancing for a set. By the time he came the end of the last set, last few reps were really nearly fantastic compare where he's been in. So it can develop really quick. So walking lunges are one of those I really hate, but I find them really effective. That's why I do them weekly. Well, literally with walking lunches, I finish my leg day as a kind of either sled push or walking lunges. I also like split squats. I find them really, really effective. Or Bulgarian squats, if we like. When it comes to upper body, uh, curls, biceps curls, unilateral. Yeah, one hand, then the other hand. When it comes to what else? What else? The lateral pull downs I do with the one leg. Either it's with the cable machine, yeah, the kneeling one, or there is a new machine in my gym which is very good kind of positioning as well. You can hold with that and really so for the lats. These are probably which comes to my mind like straight away. I'd always do those. Try to combine always doing some compound movements and then finishing training with those unilateral ones. So yeah, that's from me.
Absolutely.
And
I think as
slider
well,
slider lunges, JC, with a weights vest like what you've got on a slider.
my
Phenomenal exercise.
favorite is a pistol squat, actually. I go with a slight elevation of the heel just because I don't have that range of movement through my ankle. But that butt to floor is lights my quads up. Um, and it's also important as well, I think anybody to listening to this, we live in and I always use this phrase with my clients, we live in quite a society that's very sagittal. Everything is kind of forwards and backwards, so to me personally, and it's something I would encourage for everyone, unilateral training is super, super important. Not only unilateral, but as Scott said there as well, training in different planes. So sagittal being forwards and backwards, and then training in the frontal plane as well, side to side movements. Even obviously not to the same kind of degree, but training in a transverse plane as well. We are three-dimensional human beings. We need to train in that plane. If you only ever train in a forwards and backwards motion, when you think about how the human body is set up, you're asking for imbalances. An exercise that I've started putting out to a lot of my clients as well, something really, really simple, but like an eccentric step down. That's a fantastic off the side of a bench, a great way to also challenge balance, because that's another obviously pillar of fitness that we don't talk about. And I think people think they're just going to be able to do it. They should just be able to do it. But it's like anything. If you aren't training for it, then there's no reason to be that you should expect to be any good. That's excellent. Anything else, guys, with regards to unilateral training that we haven't discussed before I move on?
I just say to people that when your feet in that position in everyday life, not very often. When you go into the toilet, how often do your
Right
feet
now.
like that? Well, I've actually got my legs crossed, but in everyday life, we're always moving and
Yeah.
kind of, single leg and when we're walking, but most of the time we are in a single leg position.
In
So
motion,
when
yeah.
when you say that to people, then it kind of dawns on them that actually you should be exercising that way as well.
I
But
think
but also we're not telling people to throw out their bilateral exercises. It's
no.
just that
Mhm.
from a rounded point of view, you need a little bit extra thrown in there for variety. And as you said before, very important balance for fall prevention as you know, we all get older.
Do you know what? Actually, that was something that I wanted to kind of segue into. Yeah, I mean, the one thing that I find with a lot of my clients now who are in their 50s and 60s, it's their parents. And they're saying they join this program because they look at their parents and, and what situation they're in, people that can't even get out of chairs. I think I've got here the National Institute of Aging said balance training, which includes unilateral movements, has been shown to reduce fall risk in older adults by up to 30%, which is huge. And I think there was a previous podcast that we did a long time ago that Andrew, it was something about the survival rate of somebody who falls over and how quickly from going to a fall to passing away because they just can never come back from recovering from like a broken pelvis, broken hips. So yeah, absolutely. Make sure that you're throwing in balance training as well. Okay, that was great, guys. I really, really enjoyed that. In terms of fad diets, let's dive in with David, nutritionist here. What defines a fad diet, and how can people spot one?
What a question.
Think lime
Yeah,
juice.
the first thing is that no scientific knowledge, scientific backing. I think that's the main thing. So it's based on the principle. It's a short term, usually taking something out, restricting something, a short term gain that still has no strong evidence behind it scientifically. From journals, scientific research to suggest that it actually works. So it's the thing that may work. Maybe it's the gold ticket that kind of gets people to kind of do it. But the reality is it's probably something that's just crazy that's out there to just make a few bucks, I guess.
Absolutely. What what are some of the what are some of the sort of popular ones that you guys have heard of that are currently sort of doing the rounds? I'm sure things pop up, even though I feel sometimes like I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. People always say, "Oh, I read this in this magazine," or "I saw this pop up on my social media," or "I saw this on the television." What are kind of fad diets that you're hearing about right now?
So you've got paleo, intermittent fasting. You've got the carnivorous diet. You've got ketosis. And then you've got ones that are really out there, like sort of things like the green soup diet and things like that are kind of really taking out a huge amount of nutrients, but sticking with one type of food. So there's a huge number. But the ones that we tend to speak of a lot in this program and people follow I think we'd all agree is probably intermittent fasting is comes up quite a lot, guys, doesn't it? With us, and definitely ketosis. People believing that they can lower their carbs that low to kind of get that ketosis effect. So they're the main ones.
And that they
What
can lower it that low and it can be permanently sustainable forever.
Mm, yeah, that is the issue, isn't it?
Which will be hard work,
Which
which will be
defeats the
hard work.
principle of why we kind of call ourselves high performance health because we want a longevity. But
Yeah, nutrition
it's
should be
what we have to
nourishing.
deal with. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's what we deal with,
it is
unfortunately.
indeed. So Pav, when it comes to sort of dealing with clients that are discussing, nutrition with you, and for me, intermittent fasting is one of those things that constantly crops up that I'm not a huge fan of that. You're just sort of, it's just skipping a meal, right? Essentially. But that doesn't necessarily lead to sustainable weight gain, sorry, sustainable weight loss if people then just overeat within the next few meals. So your approach to your clients when trying to set kind of nutritional boundaries and stuff, how do you deal with that with your clients in terms of sort of getting them to understand the science behind, successful dieting and not so successful dieting?
So hope I'm not gonna spread the fire here now, but I'm kind of open-minded. I am not strictly against those type of diets as long as they serve the purpose. If they used as a tool, I actually have a client who tried diet A, gained some momentum, and by learning certain habits, they lean towards sustainable way how to maintain their diet. I have a client who's with me. I think he just extended second year, Tony, who has been practicing intermittent fasting. He lost weight. Then he started to eat more sustainably. Then he just controlled calories and he kind of experimenting, but he's still progressing and he's in fantastic shape. And we very close to start to build some muscles because it's very lean. Um, I had the clients who obviously been more vegetarians, kind of avoiding meat or more of course towards carnivore. So my opinion is if that's what you as a client prefer and it works for you, let's crack on with that and let's find a way how to make it sustainable. And if that's something you really enjoy and you find that you can sustain for the rest of your life and it works for you, for your health, by all means, I don't see a problem why it's not a good idea. Yeah, I genuinely think there is no good or bad. Yeah, so same way as somebody say, oh, this is the best way of eating. I don't think so. That's applicable to everyone. Same as somebody say, well, that diet won't work. Well, that's not true either, in my opinion. So it's really about finding what's, and again, sustainable. We need to consider things like I had a conversation with a client who is really, really non-stop on the go, and he said, "Pav, I don't care what I eat. If you give me a pill, I'll do it. I don't care. Food for me is just like you put petrol to a car and go. I don't have time. I'm not gonna prep. I'm not gonna do this. And that's it, yeah? And now me, try and convince him or make him do. No, that's right for him. That's what works for him. If you can stick to that, by all means, if it's obviously healthy, he it's not only obviously fuel body so you don't feel hungry, but also what effect it has long term. And if we find a balance between these, I think everyone should pick what works for him.
Yeah, I'm on Team Pav there, I have to say, actually. My approach for me personally is I eat vegetables, fruit, meat, eggs, and dairy during the week. Pretty much nothing else. I'm fairly solid with that. And then at the weekend, I do whatever I want. And I eat every single food group that there is out there.
Yeah,
And
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 one more thing
that's
I was going to mention as well, that momentum and initial win, it's really important from psychological point of view. Because if we all know that fitness is for life, the not is for life, and the results are, you just sometimes need to put on hard work to see results. And you showing up a month, maybe you feel a little bit better, but you don't see much. You're showing up another month, and then you start, see something in the mirror. Yeah, obviously on a scale something. But if you get some really good results in the first 2, 3, 4 weeks, and even if it's by avoiding certain type of food or sticking to some kind of fat diet, and then you start in the process, you're already starting to learn to teach client, or the client start to learn, like, okay, this is what I should be doing. And one, I'm firm believer, one habit at a time. Yeah, we just can't, from 0 to 100 in one day. Yeah, so let's stick to healthy breakfast, and the rest, use meal replacement, use bars, whatever. Let's stick to. Once you get consistent with that, let's tackle another. Then let's tackle another. And that process could take a year. It could take a month. It really depends how adaptable, how the client quickly can align to that. And if the fat diet or diets or whatever we're discussing it can serve the purpose, by all means, be my guest.
Yeah, I
But
completely agree with you. I
but
do.
I
Go on,
but I
Scott.
think I think you have to look as well as some things are harsher than others. And if an individual suddenly decides to drop to 800 calories a day and cut out all fruits and all vegetables and just go on meat, if that happens and there's a concurrent drop off in activity level and BMR over time, then the results of that are going to be very, very short-lived. So you have to factor in those as well. I agree with what Pav's saying. For a lot of people, it's just about getting on the wheel and turning and
Yeah.
getting going. But you've got to balance that with how harsh that regimen could be. And something going back to something like keto, that's it's about as pretty restrictive as it gets, right? You're taking an awful lot of good stuff out of your diet. If it works for a few weeks, go for it. But I personally couldn't do it. I just think there's a balance to be had. Yes, some things you need a starting point, you need to do something, but at the other time you have to look at what, as we said before, nutrition should be nourishing. There's got to be a balance there as well.
Yeah, and this is why it goes back to the scientific evidence, which I said at the beginning, because them diets have been shown good short term, but no good long term. And I think
Yeah.
that's why you've got to look at the education at the start and try and encourage people to do it the correct way. But I do agree with what Pav said as well. I think for some people, it's a psychology battle, isn't it? Sometimes you need someone to kickstart their regime, but some people they need the education to start with. And it is a balance. It is a balance, and there's probably people on so many different, spectrums that we work with, that we need to get that decision right because it can affect their long term health. But someone who's say really overweight, who needs to lose quite a considerable amount of weight because the health benefits will be so big for them, that for them, something like a restrictive diet quite quick could be really useful
I
because
would.
they're a ticking time bomb. But for some people, they've just got it in their head that the intermittent fasting is my perfect antidote for everything. When actually, if they open their mind to maybe having some variations of breakfast and different things, then maybe they can find alternatives. So there is people that just have the same structure and will never change, but there are people in the middle that can change, and there's some that are open to having a balanced, healthy diet and having something sustainable. So it's depends on the person, and that's exactly what Pav said. I think at
I,
the
I
beginning
think we
there.
can agree on this, that each diet is based on one fact, and that brings you in caloric deficit, because this is science. Yeah, you either in caloric deficit you're losing, or you're not, you're maintaining, or you're over and you're gaining. And most of diets, all the diets, well, it's science, helps you to be in caloric deficit. And what I found that sometimes client really need to go through the restrictions to understand what it is caloric deficit. That it actually works. Because you can tell, okay, eat this, and well, it doesn't work. It doesn't work for me. Well, because you think too much. No, I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah.
But when they go kind of start to avoid certain types of food, etc., naturally they decrease calories. All of a sudden it works, and they said, aha, you actually were
Mm.
right.
Yeah,
So
that
what do I do
impact,
now?
that impact of weight change is so
Yeah.
important, isn't
What
it,
what
for
what do I do
people
now?
to,
Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I have a client who I've been working with for about 15 years who does intermittent fasting, and he's still 105 kilos. So take from that what you were 105 kilos. So what's that, like 215 pounds, something like that? So, if that's a successful way to lose weight, this person hasn't found it yet. Because even if you do skip a meal, if you then go out and go ahead and eat throughout the day, the amount of food that you would have consumed for breakfast, I'd rather have breakfast. I'd rather have breakfast and then be satiated through till lunch rather than skipping a meal and then just spending an extra 750 calories on my first meal of the day, which could be lunch or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned there as well, Scott, about kind of sort of a metabolic slowdown, sort of adaptive thermogenesis. Talk a little bit about that. I mean, 800 calories is a crazy amount of calories to drop to. Is that something that you see from people on your sort of kind of in your end from your experience? And talk about how that negatively impacts weight loss. Because I think a lot of people wouldn't understand that. A lot of people think, but surely, as Pav just mentioned, but I'm in a calorie deficit. Well, then surely I should be losing weight ultra fast if I drop down to eating what's that 1/3 of the calories I should be consuming on a daily basis.
Yeah, but it can't work that way forever because your brain, your internal organs, everything has to function. I've seen it once before with a guy, it was last year actually, who had a massive drop, huge drop in his calories, and he was putting in crazy mileage on the bike, like cycling 30, 40 miles at the weekend, and nothing happened. He literally wasn't losing any weight whatsoever. And it turned out in the end that he had hormonal issues. His testosterone had tanked. There was huge amounts of things going on there that only got picked up on later. So there is the risk of that. And then on top of that, there's the risk of people starting to believe that certain foods are inherently bad. Like fruit's bad for you. That kind of mentality. Or do you know, we've all heard it
Yeah,
that someone will
sugar
say that, oh yeah, it's because it's sugar, right?
gonna
So
spike my insulin. Yeah,
yeah, both sides of that. So I've seen it before, yeah.
yeah, that's fascinating. That's was that somebody on this program?
Yes.
Yeah, I think did I happen to take over from them? I think it might have been.
No.
No? Okay, okay. Um, all right. Was there any other questions that I wanted to talk
I
to you
think a
about?
good question to ask people, James, when we as coaches, and what we can always say is what's worked in the past, what have we had good kind of, a good experience with. If it's something that's relatively restrictive but worked for that person previously, then obviously there's a psychological it may be reason or something that's working that we can reinforce.
One
So
one tool I utilize, David, actually, and I've done this with a couple of my clients recently, people that have been on the program for a year, gone through the calorie tracking, gone through different varying different diets, haven't seen a huge amount of change. And sometimes I don't agree with it long term, but if it, like you mentioned earlier, if it gets the wheel turning and gets that boost of confidence up as well, it's actually reducing their carbohydrate intake, taking away the starch, the bread, the pasta, the rice, the potatoes. There are obviously different reasons as to why you're going to see that number go down on the scale. Yes, one of it will be water weight, but for me, it was about just getting them to reduce the portions of the food that they're consuming on a daily basis. And two guys I've had that I've done this through, we did it through February, we've done it through March. They've both come down 10 pounds in that time. And I'm like, it's almost like mirror image of each other. So is it something that I'm going to say to them stay on forever? Absolutely not. But it's got them through sort of a 3 to 4 month funk. And let's just kind of speed that process up, and it's just got them into a bit more of a momentum again.
And
yeah,
on oh sorry, David, were you going to go there?
no, go for it. So yeah,
So
no, Scott, you're
the other thing I've looked at with a couple of guys is that when calories seem in balance and things have started to stall, what we've done is we've started to add up on a scale the amount of processed foods consumed and the amount of unprocessed foods. We've trying to skew that ratio. There was one chap I had, and we did an example, and I think in a week it was about 61 processed items,
Wow.
or what I would class as processed, to 29. So we just worked on just changing that balance of processed foods to unprocessed foods, and he started to feel better almost straight away.
Yeah. Yeah, no doubt. What kind of extreme level do you look at a process? Because me and my wife argue about this. I would say apple juice is a processed food because it's not not in its whole form. So what kind of level, just to give people an idea, are you talking about processed? Are you talking about like ultra high processed?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
because of this gent ate out mostly breakfast, lunch, and dinner, so it was easy to track that. But I would, breads, pastas, cookies, that kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. That's good. All right, guys, really enjoyed that today. Just before we jump off, any final thoughts that anybody wanted to add? No, happy with that. I think the final point that I would finish on is something that Pav touched on earlier. If you're looking for any kind of diet, remember the most important thing is follow the scientific evidence. And if you're not in a calorie restriction, it really doesn't make a difference. You could eat whatever you want, but being in a calorie deficit is going to ultimately give you the biggest amount of results. All right, awesome. Thanks everyone for listening, guys. Thank you for that. Really appreciate that. That
Thanks,
was
guys.
excellent, and I will see you all next week. All right, take
Bye.
care.
Cheers. Cheers.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.